Within our society, we notice many people enjoy playing video games and the ever-expanding growth of consoles. According to a State of the Industry report by Spill Games, more than 1.2 billion people are playing video games worldwide. As functionality has increased, game consoles have expanded out of their traditional niche segments to reach a variety of audiences, and nearly one in every two households have these converged devices. It has also been uncovered that within this gaming discourse, violently themed games are generally favoured. There has been a communication breakdown whether video games cause violent and antisocial behaviour. According to Christopher Ferguson, there is a range of evidence suggesting that video games have a positive impact on young people's well-being. Existing research suggests that video games contribute to young people's emotional, social, and psychological well-being. One of the main points supporting the concept that video games do not make people violent or antisocial is seen within the illogicality of the provided research findings supposedly against it. This biased, unreliable information is one of the fundamental faults within the media effects model. According to Gauntlet, it has become something of a cliche to observe that despite many decades of research and hundreds of studies, the connections between people's consumption of the mass media and their subsequent behavior have remained persistently elusive. For example, one study suggested that video game playing can be associated with risk behavior in late adolescent and young adulthood, with those who played video games reporting high levels of drug use, alcohol drinking, and poor relationships with friends and family. In conjunction with this, Christopher Ferguson states, our kids today are the least violent, most civically involved, least likely to use drugs, least likely to get pregnant, most likely to graduate from secondary education compared to the past several generations. The violent video game issue is a crusade in desperate search of a crisis. When examining the approach being made towards social issues, there are many correlations between violence in video games and Gauntlet's theories. Gauntlet notes the media effects model tackles social problems backwards, meaning that if we are to explain the problem of violence in society, researchers should begin with that social violence and seek to explain it with reference, quite obviously to those who engage in it, their identity, background, character, and so on. The media effects approach, in this sense, comes at the problem backwards, by starting with the media and then trying to lasso connections from there onto social beings, rather than the other way around. This is definitely something that should be looked into when looking specifically at violent video games and their effects on players. Christopher Ferguson states, there seems to be little evidence that violent video games cause a reduction in empathy or civic behavior. In another recent study of his, he found that youth exposed to violent video gaming actually engaged in more pro-social behaviors. Most of the research conducted against video game violence shows most of the people tested were children. This again displays an inaccurate form of research. It also highlights yet another flaw in the media effects model, whereby children are considered as being less educated and considered not so much in terms of what they can do as what they apparently cannot. In the context, according to Hop, Huber, and Weeb, demonstrated that exposure to violent video games was the strongest risk factor for violent criminality and antisocial behavior. This information is in fact proven invalid by Unsworth and Ward, who found that children view portrayals of violence within video games as unrealistic and consequently rather amusing. For example, one of the girls interviewed in the 15 to 17 age bracket said, I played the Mortal Kombat game. You know it is violent, but it's sort of funny. The way they chop their heads off, you just laugh because it's so crazy. You know it's not real. Although there is lots of research supporting the claim that violence in video games influences cynical and sedentary behavior, there seems to be no valid examples to support this. In conjunction with this, Gauntlet notes how surveys typically show that whilst a certain proportion of the public feel that the media may cause other people to engage in antisocial behavior, almost no one ever says that they have been affected in that way themselves. Here we can see that evidence on some of the most important psychological questions concerning the effect violent games have on users is yet to surface.